are listening to the Justin Beahm Radio Hour.
Welcome to the Radio Hour podcast. I'm your host, Justin Beahm. This episode is all about the state of physical media, a real hot topic among collectors and different labels and distributors. In this age of streaming becoming the norm, it's interesting how it still seems to be something that is relatively unmastered. You have big studios like Netflix and Hulu who have a huge footprint in the game, but in terms of really maximizing what streaming can do, it seems like it's still in its infancy. In relation to physical media, it's become a discussion about what drives a collector to buy something. What is it in 2025 that will incentivize investment in a disc? There's a lot of labels out there right now, and I've had discussions about this on various episodes, most notably where I had Anthony Ciferante on at the end of last year talking about the best releases of 2024. It really is in some ways a golden age of collecting because there are so many labels that have cropped up that are offering titles that I certainly never thought would see the light of day. I'm looking at Vinegar Syndrome in particular, and then all the sub-labels that fall under the Vinegar banner. Each one of them has its own specialty. And then there are the bigger distributor players like Shout Factory and Arrow that have been doing a tremendous job with different box sets, Arrow in particular. And then relative newcomers like Umbrella that I've mentioned on here, who are really coming out of the gate strong with display boxes, all kinds of extras, lobby cards, booklets, things like that they pack in there. So it begs the question, where does physical media stand in an age where there's really only one retailer here in the States that even stocks them anymore? Best Buy is gone. Target, I think, is gone by this point. It's down to Walmart. Walmart has a sticky history when it comes to this kind of stuff because I remember back in the day when they mandated censored movies and censored music on their shelves. They used to make crazy mandates of distributors and creatives. Rename your movie. Get rid of that corner of the cover where it shows a bloody knife. And in music, it had to be censored versions of everything. It was really awful. It was terrible. And I think that they've had a transition in buyership since that time. I think it's Alliance now, who seems really down with physical media. In fact, to Walmart's credit, they have been really, really big contributors to exclusive releases as of the last few years, primarily in the realm of steelbooks. They also do themed end caps for different seasons and holidays, which is always fun because they also will mix with their Valentine stuff. They'll mix in horror titles like My Bloody Valentine and things like that, which is really fun to see. They also do exclusive covers, glow-in-the-dark slips and things. So Walmart isn't passively sitting there just collecting money off of cheap bargain bin discs, which is what many people have thought about them historically. But they're the lone entity. They're the last ones that are out there doing this in the physical realm at this point, on a national basis at least. Around the distribution circles and people who do what I do, like the special feature realm, a lot of discussion as of the last few years has been directed toward, well, what is next? Where are things now? Yes, we understand physical media is on the decline in terms of a general audience, but at the same time, that's being weighed out to a certain extent by all of these boutique labels that are cropping up, and most of which are doing very well. So it certainly isn't any kind of a doom and gloom scenario at the moment, but I do think that there are huge changes afoot, and it's been happening for a long time. I remember having a meeting with one distributor, probably 5 years ago now, and at that time I was warned that this is all probably going to be gone by that following year. Clearly that hasn't happened. In fact, quite the opposite with all these labels cropping up. The studios themselves are pretty much backing away from physical media. I know Disney had that big shift recently where they put the kibosh on their Collectors Club, which had been running for a long, long time. But the collector world is always going to want to have ownership and possession of the movies that they love, just like with music. Who would have thought, even 10 years ago, especially beyond that vinyl would be the dominant physical music format in 2025? And here we are. It is. So even if the disc thing is going to be going away, there has to be some next wave. No one that I've heard of is even speculating on what that might be. But I know that people are not going to generally be content with streaming by itself. There is no dependability to what's going to be available on any streaming service at any time, even if it's something you've purchased, like on Amazon. If they lose their license with a distributor or studio, or even just on a specific title, even if you had bought that in the past, it just disappears. There have been streaming services where people could use digital codes off of their physical releases that have just gone away. Poof. And I know some of those fed into other services that were similar when that occurred, but the fact remains that it's still not dependable. When you look at someone like a Shudder even, their licenses go up on titles and it can eviscerate even one of their own series like Joe Bob. The Last Drive-In first marathon has come and gone. I mean, it's been very strange over time to see as licenses fall away and then a couple come back. But the seasons of Last Drive-In, for the most part, have been gutted because once a license is up, that goes away. Now, Shudder is wise enough to still put the Joe Bob content on there. There's a section called Just Joe Bob, which I think is great. But we want the movies. When you're in the mood to watch something, you're in the mood to watch it. That's the bottom line. And the only way to guarantee that is to have it in hand on your shelf. Beyond that, there's the whole topic of special features, which is something that, as you're going to hear in these discussions today, has really been ignored for the most part by streamers. There are some that do include some content. My first guest on the show here is Jacob Fowler, who's Steelbook Obsessed on Instagram, and he really has his finger on the pulse of everything that's coming out, from the majors, from the indies, onto the most boutique labels. And I wanted to bring him on the show to talk about his perspective on this whole world because he's a big voice in it and he's been watching closely as things are trending. It's a fascinating discussion with him about this because he points to some things that I hadn't previously considered. He said that there are some streamers that offer bonus content, one of them being Max, HBO Max, which will follow shows with making of segments immediately after you watch them in some cases. And I remember that from Game of Thrones. When Game of Thrones was airing, you had the option to immediately watch a little bit about that episode you had just viewed, which I thought was really cool. I also remember HBO having some special features on some documentaries of their own historically, maybe some extra interviews and things like that, which is really appreciated. But so much of this, it hasn't caught on in the streaming world, and I don't see entities like Tubi really caring about this segment. How important is that now? How important are special features in 2025? When special features were coming into their own, it was really during the days of the Laserdisc. That's when this whole thing began. And the early DVDs were really just ported forward Laserdisc releases, and they would carry that special content on to the smaller format. When Blu-ray came and there was more space on the disc, then this thing exploded. I mean, you didn't have to have a separate disc for special features anymore. You could pack it all onto one with the movie looking as great as Blu-ray looks. So that was really revolutionary. That was also happening around the same time as the explosion of the internet. Back when these things were fresh, when Laserdiscs were showing us documentary stuff like this for the first time in a home format, it was mind-blowing. It was really revolutionary because at that time, the only places you could go to learn about these things were really the library and the newsstand. You had Fangoria, Gorezone, Slaughterhouse. These were the fountains for us. These were the resources where we knew we could read about the movies we love, find out about the special effects we were curious about, and then learn about what was coming up next. But there's always that lag, right, between newsprint deadlines and when something would either land in the video store or in the theater, especially when Fango would do historical retrospectives. It was always really valuable because that would introduce you to things that you had never seen before, that you might not have even heard of or been exposed to. And that was really valuable. The internet changed all that. Well, it changed everything. It changed all of that because the need to travel somewhere and track something down to learn about this stuff went away. Now you have archives of a lot of those magazines, so they're digitized in many places. I know that Fangoria has been working on digitizing their entire back catalog for a long time, and I'm pretty sure subscribers have access to that. And outside of that, there are so many different documentaries that are fan-made that are put up on YouTube and other places like Vimeo, where you can get a lot of great information and background on even the most obscure stuff. And then, of course, there's the bootleg thing where people have simply ripped a documentary and put it on YouTube for however long it's up and lasts. I've certainly bumped into a number of mine on there, and I'm always surprised at how long they've been up and how many views they had. If the companies had sold that many discs, oh my God, it's kind of like the music thing back when piracy was really starting to fire, and you're realizing 10 million downloads for an album or a song or something on these bootleg pirate sites, and you're thinking, Jesus, this would have put that band and that label in a really great position if that could have been invested the proper way. But it is what it is, and piracy's not going away, and especially if a disc goes out of print, how do you argue against making some of this stuff available somewhere? I think it needs to live somewhere. And the way that people sell stuff on eBay, thinking there's an exorbitant value attached to everything that's over just a couple years old, it is challenging to keep up with trying to track down things that you might not have had the chance to get on the first go-round. So I understand this to an extent. I don't think these things should just go away. But it begs the question in relation to this conversation in this episode, what happens now with this stuff? Is it worth it for studios to continue investing in EPK teams to shoot on-set interviews and then have someone assemble them? Jacob and I touch on this a little bit in my conversation with him, but I've done a few of these things where I am hired by a studio to assemble a documentary made of EPK interviews, or in one case even steer the EPK team to shoot what I needed for the documentary. And they're intended for streaming only. So they're meant to accompany the movies on, let's say, iTunes, for example, which I did. And these things had good budgets, and I had the best collection of materials that you could imagine. I mean, anything that I needed was there, and the coverage was amazing. It was such a delight to put these things together. But at the end of the day, I can't even tell you where to go to watch them. I have no idea where these things are streaming. I had one person reach out to me who was in one of these films after his agent had shown him the documentary I did on it. And he found me on Instagram and wrote to me and was like, man, I love this documentary. I'm so surprised that something became of this because I do these interviews all the time and it seems like nothing ever really happens with them. And that's to my point here today. What happens now with special features? Do these studios and distributors keep investing in this stuff? How important is it to you as an audience? How important is it to the history of a film and preserving its story and for future reference? It's not just about right now. How many interviews or commentaries can we look back on now on a given film only to realize that that may be the only artifact that exists in relation to someone telling the tales behind its production? We can't lose this history. We can't ignore this history. It's being made every day on every film that is in production, and I feel it's vital to continue this effort to preserve and archive these stories for historical purposes as well as entertainment purposes. And I certainly hope that all these different labels keep putting whatever they can, however small, however large, into the effort to make special features a priority, to pack these as much as they can with content, and to not just throw bare bones releases at an audience that really, I think, remains hungry for much more than that. One of the things Jacob brings up that I also hadn't considered is the video game console element. Video game consoles have been the DVD, Blu-ray, whatever player in the house for many people in many families for a number of years now. And he is concerned that once that changes, because there's a big movement underway right now with gaming to move away from discs, once that changes, what happens to the physical media market? Does it put a further dent in this thing that we already see pretty battered? How will that impact things? And so to speak on that, I reached out to my good buddy Mike Saunders from Attack of the Killer podcast, who's been working as a manager of a video game store for, I think, almost 20 years now. And Mike has seen a lot of changes, a lot of things come and go, but especially in the realm of the digitization of this stuff, where there's streaming subscription packages now available through different game manufacturers or just different platforms, that is really forcing the hand of the buying public, not giving the option in some cases to even offer a physical version of a game that they can play if they don't happen to have internet. What a thing to consider, right? So I ask Mike about that and ask him what he sees in the future. And it's really interesting as a sort of complement to my discussion with Jake, because it answers some of the questions that Jake poses regarding the video game world and its potential impact on the world of movies that we love so much. I'd love to hear from you on this topic. So the voicemail subject for the next episode is going to be, what's your perspective on physical media in 2025? What do you see as happening? Where do you see things going? And what matters to you when you choose to or not to pick up a physical media release of a film? You can call anytime at 951-357-6955, or you can send an email to radiohourpod@gmail.com. I would really love to hear from you, and I'll play those on the air on the next episode to continue this discussion that I think is so relevant right now. Again, that's 951-357-6955. You can call anytime, day or night. It doesn't ring a physical phone here, so if it's midnight and you're inspired, feel free to call. Before we get into these discussions with Jake and with Mike, let's check out what's new. Now available from Kino Lorber with special features from My Reverend Entertainment are Body Parts on 4K and April Fool's Day, also on 4K. Inglourious Bastards is also now available from Arrow Video. Upcoming releases include The Gift on the 27th of January from Arrow Video, and then in February, the Bewitched Complete Series Blu-ray set from Mill Creek. Also in February is Graveyard Shift on 4K, another one from Kino, who seems to be licensing this stuff that Shout Factory set down. I'm really grateful to Kino for pulling forward all of my special features on this stuff, because I love when it lives on, when it finds a new home. Super exciting. The Patreon for the Radio Hour is at patreon.com/the Justin Beam Radio Hour. You can also find that link on my website, which is justinbeam.com. And then, as I mentioned on the last episode, the new merch store is now open. If you go to my site, just go to the menu, very bottom, you'll find store there. And I've been adding all kinds of insane stuff to this, and it's just going to keep on growing. So please check that out at justinbeam.com. Every dollar that you spend goes to support the Radio Hour and Reverend Entertainment. It is really, really appreciated. Also on that last episode, I hinted at a publishing project that's happening, and I'm proud to announce my first book is going to be available February 1st on Amazon, and it is the collected columns from my Roadside Memories piece that runs every month in TV Guide's Remind magazine. The title of the book is Roadside Memories, Beloved and Bizarre Attractions from North America's Past. And I'm presenting all of the copy from each one of those and a bunch of new information, background, new stories, a lot of insight that we can't fit into the footprint that the magazine allows me. So the ebook is going to be available February 1st again, and then the paperback is going to be made available very shortly thereafter. There's also going to be an audiobook version that I'll be narrating, and that'll be available right around that same time. So by mid-February, all three versions of this book will be available. Go to Amazon.com. You can also go to my website, and I'll have a link to it there by the time this episode lands. Roadside Memories. I'm super excited about this. I'm passionate about this column. These stories are so fascinating. Whether you're a fan of nostalgia, bizarre roadside stuff, carnivals, amusement parks, weird hotels, it's all there, and it's a hell of a lot of fun, and I hope you guys enjoy that. And I will just also tease, this is just the beginning. Just the beginning. So here's my discussion with Jacob Fowler, who is again Steelbook obsessed on Instagram. I'm going to have links to his podcast, to his Insta page in the show description. Check him out, follow him because he does really great videos and updates. He's getting stuff all the time in the mail. And when he runs through the pros and cons of each one of these releases, he has really combed through it. He does his homework for sure, which is something that not a lot of reviewers do. In my decade now of doing this special feature stuff, I am always amazed at how few reviewers actually watch any of it. Many of them just list the special features, and I get that that can take a while to dig through, but again, to my point at the beginning of this episode, this stuff is valuable. I think it's worth letting people know what they're looking to potentially invest in. And the special features are a huge part of that. So kudos to Jacob for what he does, and I enjoy this discussion with him. After that, you're going to hear from Mike Saunders, again from Attack of the Killer podcast and Prescribed Films. Mike lends some additional insight into the video game side of the discussion that Jacob sparked. So let's get right into that. Talk to you on the other side. So, Jake, thank you so much for coming on the show, man. This is going to be fun.
Yeah, I am 100% ready to talk to you, Justin. I've had you on my podcast, Boutique Talk, and now I'm excited to go and chat about whatever we want to chat about today. I'm not quite sure where this is going to go.
I think that you have a pretty cool perspective on where physical media stands right now. And this is a hot topic for everybody in the business as a whole. There's a lot of changes happening, obviously, with streaming. You and I both know that the landscape of media in relation to fandom, I'm going to say it that way, is really changing right now. And the
Mhm.
streaming thing continues to grow. It still feels to me like there's real no leader. There's really no leader or leaders in that realm. There are big brands, but in terms of harnessing more than just content, putting
Sure.
content out there, I don't think I don't think streaming has really settled yet. And as Best Buy is pulling physical off their shelves, Walmart is reducing their footprint a little bit by little bit, and Target I think is getting rid of it too.
Yeah, they
it's
already
this
have.
it's this
Hmm.
crazy moment right now where it's like, okay, this is in the hands of the fans. This is where vinyl was like 20 years ago, where
Sure.
no one was stocking it, but it was still being pressed here and there. The collectors were absolutely devoted to their collections and to growing them in the record shops and things. But it's different because we don't even really have that many video shops anymore. So I'm really curious. You coming in and you have a huge footprint in the realm of discussion around this stuff
Hmm.
with your social media, with your podcast. And I just really want to drill into a little bit what you're seeing as you've continued to sort of go deeper and deeper with your, not only your own collection,
Hmm.
but your interactions with labels, with different creators from the various sides of it. Like you said, you had me on your show and you've had so many great guests and things. Tell me tell me about, well, let's step back just a second first and tell me about when you started to go deep on this initially. When did this become more than like a passive thing just to keep the movies that you love at hand?
Sure. We're gonna squeeze a lot of juice today, Justin.
Yeah,
I love
man.
this. I started collecting when I was in college. I actually high school, like I got my first paycheck. I just kept on buying movies, kept on buying music, like CDs. That was a big
Mhm.
thing to me back in high school. Gradually, as college kept on going and I got my own place, I wanted to have a lot of movies to fill that space with. And I don't think I really got serious into like collecting and like knowing what boutique labels were or anything until Scream Factory. I figured out what that was and I did a deep dive into them around like 2017, 2018.
Sure.
And it's just kind of branched from there. And I think where I was around that time in 2017, 2018 is where a lot of people who want to collect physical media, that's how they're gonna have to go about it because retail space is shrinking quickly. Like right now, we have Walmart, and that's the only major retail space that there is for physical media, and that's not a great place for people to discover things. Like
Right.
you have to either come across physical media now in a Goodwill at a secondhand store. Like if you're maybe shopping for vinyl, you might see movies on the side too and want to pick those up. I really do think that last year, this year, the next few years is going to be like, okay, how many people actually want this? Honestly, and it's in an interesting space just because I don't know where things are going to shake out. It's great for me. I love collecting this type of stuff. I love collecting stuff in great packaging, load releases with extras. That's what boutique labels do best. Just I don't know. I have no idea where this is gonna shake out, but I am ready for the ride. Just because the people who love this stuff absolutely love it, want to get as much as possible. There's a couple other avenues we can go and talk about today with like the rising costs of everything, just because
Yeah.
the format of how you sell product is changing. There's a lot to get into, and that was kind of a rambling answer, but that's what I got for you on how I started.
Yeah. I think that your point about happening on to things at Walmart is a big one because you don't have anywhere you're guaranteed to find something when you're
Hmm.
walking in at this point. And that's a hard thing for people, especially of a certain age, who were used to release day for music and for movies. You knew what day was what, and you knew what was coming out. And there were places you could go. And if they didn't have it at A, you'd drive across town to B, and you'd get to take it home that night and look forward to that.
Yeah.
And this, it was like it's applying the rental mentality to the retail space, where rentals is the same thing. You knew what the release day was. You'd hope it
Mm.
was in stock, and you get to take it home. And it's so different now because it's found, which I think is a lot of what's happening on streaming too, especially with services like Tubi, where they have a huge catalog of films that are on there, but you don't really know what is there. There's no way to know. There's no catalog for you to really dig through or updates that are real regular on that stuff. And so I think it's really strange how we have to find new material now. And I that's one thing that comes to mind a lot when I hear people decrying the current state of horror, for example,
Mm.
because it's like, oh, no one's making great horror. Well, there's good stuff being made. It's just
There
hard to
is.
find it. It's hard to
Well, in
find it.
like popular mediums right now from a lot of major studios, like we're at a horror renaissance again. Like there's a lot of good horror that people are going to movie theaters to see. Like
Yeah.
we had this spike in like the late 90s, early 2000s, and I feel like we're in that time again. I feel like getting people to the movie theater is hard enough as is.
Yeah.
So getting the younger generation back in there, wanting to have like a scare, a collective scare together in one group is great to see. That was the movie theater bit. I on the collecting front and like not being able to have a collective space to go and pick something up with a group of friends. Like back when I started YouTube, like I had a channel that is no longer debunked. I had like 2017, 2018 when I figured out what Scream Factory was. I
Mhm.
feel like I figured out what boutique labels were because of YouTube. Like that's where I kind of like deep dove into stuff. And I kept on seeing people go to retail stores and have like a vlog on new release Tuesday. Like that was a big thing. Going there, seeing what they pick up, I get an idea of what is out that week. I go pick up stuff myself. Now even that has splintered in half to where it's now every other Tuesday. But I mean, with Walmart release windows, you can walk in there on like a Sunday, a Saturday before release day, and there might be stuff on the shelf. It's the
Yeah.
wild West right now. It's
Yeah.
absolutely
Yeah. Yeah.
all rules are out the window. With streaming, each app has its own launch day. Like Disney Plus is on Fridays, Apple TV Plus is on Sundays, Netflix is whenever the hell it wants to release anything new.
Mhm.
It's just it's hard to get that collective feeling that we used to have and kind of like I don't know, not take advantage of it, just like take not think that it was ever going to go away, I guess. And now
Yeah.
that
I
it
took it for granted in a
took it for
way.
granted, exactly. That's exactly the
We're good about that as a culture, though. We take people for granted. We take everything for granted until it's gone, until there's an announcement of someone passing away or whatever. Like, we're terrible about celebrating people when they're alive. We're terrible about understanding the wonder around us all the time. And
Mhm.
we're going to look back at this moment, which we see, many of us, as chaos right now in the business. And we're
Yes.
going to say, man, to your point about the theatrical thing, what an exciting moment for independent cinema right now. I
Yeah,
think,
the Substance that came out of nowhere almost made $100 million. Same with Terrifier 3.
well, that was more so to Terrifier 3
Yes.
because
Hmm.
that blew the doors off of the theatrical, I guess you'd say, the constraints of what we understood about theatrical
Yes.
and and the need for a rating, things like that. And so I think that yeah, it's good for horror, but it's good for film as a whole because the more of that happens, the better. The more really out there stuff that is breaking boundaries, whether you love it or hate it, it's opening doors. And I
Yeah.
think that that's super vital moment that we're in right now. And on the physical side, these boutique labels, man, it is
Right.
wild how
Mhm.
many boutique labels are out there cranking out amazing releases of things that we never thought we would have seen. A lot of things that I've never even heard of that I get introduced to this way. So it is like back to the video rental analogy that through these boutique labels, it's almost like we're blind renting at video stores again.
Mhm.
Just loving the cover. Okay, I'm in this. People are devout in their devotion to a label like Vinegar
Yes.
Syndrome.
I was
For
just going to bring up Vinegar Syndrome. Like every month, they always have new releases. And
yep,
again, with YouTube, like there's live stream communities that like go over everything. And I would say 90% of the movies that Vincent releases, I have no idea what the hell it is, like at
yeah,
all.
yeah,
So I go and I look to these people who might have a knowledge of it, get their 2 cents. And this is where Tubi, like we said before, comes in clutch because they have pretty much every Vincent movie ever released that you can
yeah.
watch on there, kind of see if it's your vibe and decide if you want to spend 20, $30 on a release.
Right, right. To your point about the price earlier, you just mentioned 20 to 30 bucks. What have you seen in terms of prices over the last few years and how that correlates to what you're getting in turn, what you're getting for what you're
Mhm.
investing?
I think just with a lot of other aspects in our life, COVID changed that. COVID made everything a little bit more difficult to get, made things more expensive for the supplier, which in turn is going to make how much a company charges for a release more because they
Hmm.
don't want to lose any type of profit, any type of percentage. So
Right,
that cost is going to come and trickle down back to the consumer, which is unfortunate. But again, it's part of the collector mentality. Like, if you want to have this physical media stay where it is or still flourish as much as it possibly can, the sad reality is we have to kind of bite bullets. Like they're the $20 Lionsgate steelbooks that we used to take for granted in Best Buy, those days are long gone. And now they're releasing steelbooks for 40 bucks on their own website. They're trying to do the boutique label. Like
right.
I feel like there's going to be a lot of different avenues that even major studios are going to go down to try and grasp that boutique label mentality. Like I know that Paramount Scares has their own little sub label that they're trying to grow. I would not be shocked if they launch their own website and start doing more boutique box sets, kind of like what they're doing with Paramount Scares, but like even like more drilled down.
Hmm.
Because I want to say they've had success with the Paramount Scares line. So
Yeah.
I just see like smaller numbers of product, but you can charge more for those numbers. I feel like it's a winning strategy, especially if you have a good catalog of movies to wrap it around.
It's the same theory that retail has taken for the most part, where fewer places are trying to be everything to their customer, more are sort of funneling their energy into a niche of some sort. So
Sure.
there are always going to be the Walmarts, and I think shop owners know that you can't really compete with that as an all-in-one type thing. And so it's interesting. Like I worked in music retail for quite a while. I mean, quite a number of years, and selling drums and guitars and stuff. And a lot of those shops went from being we do everything. We have band instruments, we have this, we have that, we have to either specializing just in stage gear, like just drums and guitars, or just drum shops. And I think that that's because the customer has so many options out there now.
Hmm.
And with the places that people are going to get the physical media, I think that it's been interesting where Amazon Amazon still has the biggest piece, I think, of the action on that just because of their warehousing and distribution model.
Hmm.
But I think that places like Diabolic do a real service to fans because they're picking up stuff that no one else would.
And they're kind of eating the costs on bringing in product from overseas.
Right.
The Diabolics, I use Orbit DVD religiously. I've never had a bad experience with them at all.
Mhm.
And they're able to, like, Umbrella Entertainment from Australia, you have Second Sight from the UK. Like, there's a lot of these labels that some people might want, but they don't want to pay the $10, $15 that they have to do just to ship it to
Right.
yourself. So
Yeah.
it's nice to have those little third party companies like that.
Oh yeah, I think it's super valuable. It really is. So what changes have you seen in well, it maybe changes isn't the way to say it, but when you're looking, because you evaluate special features, you look through this stuff. Not everyone does.
Right.
It's amazing how many reviews just list the special features and don't even get into them or review them. I'm curious, as you've been monitoring things so closely, and you are really like you have haul videos pretty much every week that you have new things coming in the mail. You're always having boxes show up.
Mhm.
Have you seen changes in how much these companies are putting into special features, or some of them backing off, some of them pouring more into it? I'm curious what you're reading in the tea leaves on that.
I could kind of break this down into boutique and just major studios. Like, I
Yeah.
would say major studios first, because that one's very simple answer. A lot of them are either not putting any resources into special features, which drives me nuts. Like the new Kill Bills and Jackie Brown that came out from Lionsgate, they just took the archival stuff, and that really bums me out. But
Yeah.
it seems to only bum out a certain demographic of physical media collectors. Some people only care about the transfer. If I'm going to pay $40, I want more than just a 4K. I'd be happy with a Blu-ray in my collection.
Sure.
I want as many extra goodies inside of my disc as I possibly can get. I would say out of the major Hollywood studios, I would say Warner Brothers is probably putting the most into new special features. I Furiosa had a great 4-part making of documentary that was over an hour long.
Oh yeah.
That
Yeah.
it was glorious. I just watched Joker Folie à Deux last night, and there was a 45-minute documentary with, and they put love and care and money into having somebody on set filming everything. Like, that's rare these days,
Yeah.
which is sad.
Yeah. I did when I did a few releases for the Paramount and Blumhouse partnership
Hmm.
a couple years ago, and it's maybe three films back to back to back, and I was amazed. They had EPK teams, and I got one of them. I got to run the EPK team on, and then I'm cutting everything that they're sending me.
Hmm.
I was really amazed that they went to the expense. And when I finished the documentaries for each one, because I did a full fledged doc on all three of these, on each one of them, they were
Hmm.
meant to accompany these films on streaming. And the initial thing was going to be through Apple, I think, the Apple platform.
Okay.
They're invisible now. These things they're just missing in action. No one I these things had bigger budgets than anything I've worked on. I had more content. I had these amazing, I mean, thousands of images and behind the scenes clips. I mean, it
Hmm.
was incredible the resources that I had to work with on these things. And no one can find them. No one knows where they are. And so I would reach out to some cast members and things. And I remember Kyle Gallner wrote to me and he said, because they had to present these for approval to each on this one that he was on. And he tracked me down on social media and he's like, man, I love the documentary. And he said, I do these interviews so often on the sets and they never become anything. They
Hmm.
never go anywhere. And he said, yours is like the first documentary that can remember actually being assembled and released. And then he's like, where can I tell people to watch this? And I'm like, let me ask. I don't know.
That's
No one
terrible.
knows. No one knows where they went.
And I think the sad part is I think special features are dying just because streaming hides them, like if they're there at all.
Yeah.
You have to go to a specific tab on the actual page just to find it, and it's usually hidden. Like there's even like completely different cuts of films that are hidden that way too. I feel like people have it in their mind to stream movies and nothing else. Just get the movie out of your system and don't learn anything else about it. One thing I
Or they
love
don't
about
know. I think more so, I would guess that people just don't know that that content is there because I've seen it when people ask about this. I point to HBO for one.
yeah.
I found that HBO historically, especially, I think maybe Game of Thrones is what prompted a lot of this, but they've opened up a lot of special feature, at least sidebar content with some
Mhm.
documentary things on some of their options on streaming, but I don't think it's common enough now that people even realize it's there. Do you? Do you think people know to look?
One good thing about HBO is that even on Max, once the episode's over and you want to learn more, it plays it at the end of an episode. Like I watched The Penguin, and there were like 5-minute clips of what happened, why they decided to go that way, just like making up stuff that I
Oh,
love
cool.
to watch.
Cool.
So I think Max is very isolated when it comes to that on a streaming service
Right.
because it kind of builds it in for people who are looking for that content. Um, that's why one of the reasons why I started collecting physical media in the first place is because when I watch a movie, I want to learn about everything I possibly can about that movie. So I'll drill into the special features on the disc. I still don't know if that mindset has made it to streaming. I think I can't even tell you anybody that I know in my inner circle that really watches the special features on Max.
Yeah.
It's yeah, I think it's just times are changing a little bit, and the people who actually want to learn the meat and potatoes of how things are made is shrinking a little bit, which is unfortunate.
I think too that there's a with the cultural shift in the access of everything on the internet and whether it's accurate or not, there's so much out there. There's so much information on YouTube. If you want to look up a making of on something, it's probably been bootlegged and put out there, or someone's done a fan doc on things. And so, where when Anchor Bay first started rolling out those great widescreen tapes, that would have a second cassette with it sometimes, or
Yeah.
a making of documentary at the end of it, or sometimes a commentary tape or whatever. That was revolutionary to me because I never had access to Laserdisc. I never knew that world.
Sure.
But that to me was like, holy shit, I don't have to go to the newsstand now, track down a magazine and hope that there's some coverage of whatever weirdo movies I'm into, or have to dig back through archives at comic book shops and whatever else. I mean, so
Mhm.
I think that certainly has fed the climate in relation to special features now. It's
That's
just that
another
there's
thing though,
so
like
damn much out there.
there's so much out there to where you will get distracted. Like you might go on one thing looking for something to look up and you go into a completely different rabbit hole. So
Yeah.
learning things or wanting to learn things and then not even looking up the thing you were there to look up in the first place,
Yeah.
that happens all the time.
Yeah. Of course. Of course. So, who do you think right now, if you had to really put up a billboard
Hmm.
that said, here's who's doing this right in the realm of physical media, we're in 2025. I don't know what anybody's slates look like for this year for the most part outside of the people that I work with, but I know everyone's still doing this. And
Yeah.
so I'm asking you, for the listeners, who do you point to and say these guys are going to give you a bang for your buck and they're doing it the right way?
I would say overall, relatively consistently, Arrow Video is probably doing the best when it comes to the special feature realm.
Yeah.
Because not only do they do archival stuff, which is great to have. Like if I have a disc, I want to make sure that I have as much information that I can fit on there. But
Right.
they're also coming out and making new content for that disc. The Inglorious Bastards release that they just came out with, every single special feature that was released before that on that Blu-ray, which has a lot of great nuggets to drill into if you want to. They're
Hmm.
there, but they also have new interviews with the editor that kind of took over for Sally Mankey. They have an interview with Greg Nicotero, a new one, which is great to see. That I think you had a little bit of help with there, so thank you for that. And then they also had an interview with one of the cast members who I wouldn't think that I would want to listen to them talk about their experience for half an hour, but they were so enthralling to listen to that I'm glad that it was there because I
Yeah.
learned some tidbits that I did not know before.
Yeah. I think that's vital to port that stuff forward as much as they can.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, oftentimes it gets lost in licensing, you know, black holes. That's
sure.
why I always tell people keep hold of your DVDs. Hold on to, if you love a movie,
Hmm.
just hold on to that DVD because you never know when that shit's going to disappear. Not everyone is Ridley Scott, who's going to make sure to release Blade Runner. If he wants to mess with it again, he's just going to keep piling on top of it and giving you everything every time. And so I think it's a shame that with physical media transitioning, I look at it as a film preservation crisis too,
Mm-hmm.
because these movies can go away. You cannot trust streaming, even though Tubi may have a lot right now. That's all based on license, and
Sure.
those licenses expire or they
Absolutely.
bandwidth whatever. There's a million reasons why things go away. And these movies that I'm talking about in relation to the Blumhouse Paramount thing, they never got physical release. And when I
Mm.
asked about that, they're like, no, no one's interested in that. I'm like, one of them's a Marcus Dunstan film. Like Marcus has a
Yeah.
fan base.
Why'd you make documentaries for things that you have no idea where they'd have a home
Right.
in the
Yeah,
first
to
place?
feed the
That would drive me
streaming.
mad. Yeah.
Oh, and it feels so weird for me. This is why I've never written for the internet. I've done a couple little bits and pieces here and there. It's just, it
Mhm.
feels like I'm just throwing a pebble in the ocean, where a magazine, even though I know it's not what it once was either, that feels like a permanent addition to something to me. And that's a very valuable element of all physical media, I think. That's important to me, is knowing it's going to be there and then having something tangible at the end of it.
Well,
But
that's another sliver in the collector mindset is like the booklet that comes with a lot of these releases.
oh yeah.
A lot of people like to flip through them and read the essays. I never really touch them. Like I do it to show people on the video,
Yeah.
but that's the only time I really flip through, unless there's like images that I really want to see. Me personally, if I want to learn about the movie, I want a visual component on the disc to watch and learn
Yeah.
instead of just read. I mean, sometimes it's a lot easier to have that on paper, and I get it's more feasible for good information to kind of like have somewhere to live. But
Yeah, and then I would really point to Umbrella because I'm doing a lot of work with them, and I love the just the creative freedom that's associated with partnering with them. And those booklets are a big part of that. If you look at like that full moon box, they'll
they
put
do, yes,
they
they
put
do
shit in those
booklets
booklets that
differently.
makes no sense at all. And I love it.
Umbrella is always like the asterisk in the conversation because they don't just talk about the movie that is in the case. They talk about like the genre, like the subgenre of a
Yeah,
subgenre that
yeah.
that movie is. I love their booklets and I love those essays. I just don't like making of specifically to read and
Sure.
go down into. But
Yeah.
even with Umbrella, like their special features, they have a lot of video essays that I love.
Mhm.
And even if you're not going to make anything new per se, they have like these even just putting like the trailers from the director's filmography on a release. I love that stuff too because
Yeah.
it's preservation. It's just kind of if you want to learn more about the director of the movie you just watched, at least you have like something to fall back on, even if you're not making 1,000% something new. Like I don't understand why even if you're not going to make new special features, which I get, I understand there might not be a lot of budget in that department.
Mhm.
At least like try and do research and look back in time and see if there's anything from like a Siskel and Ebert review or a like a TV junket interview or something just from that time just to have. Like I don't know what type of rights are tied up there, but Jackie Brown had the Siskel and Ebert review, and I'm like, why doesn't everybody do this? And obviously, if it was done in the past, people can still do it now. Like I just feel like
It's just
people don't.
money. Yeah,
But
that's
still,
all
it can't be that much money to get a
that's all
Siskel and Ebert
licensing.
review.
Well, but not like you're talking about, some of these labels don't have a lot of budget for those kinds of things. And that's why that's what ushered in the video essay concept,
Yeah.
where it's not a documentary, it's not an interview, it's a
Mhm.
video essay, which is kind of a historical retrospective in a way. And I think that fills a gap for
Mhm.
companies that can't afford to do a lot of other licensing and things. And that's a big thing with Arrow has the means to pull in all those historical special features.
Yeah.
I know when I'm often surprised when I see a title announced from like Kino or someone else, and they've ported forward my special features from Shout Factory stuff, because I think that they're being charged for that.
Right.
And so it can live on, but it doesn't by default travel with the film, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And I think that with these smaller labels, it's just not within their means to do a whole lot of licensing like that, which is it, I guess. But it's great that you love the video essay thing. And I think those booklets fill that same gap. It is something. And
Right.
lobby card reproductions and all those kinds of the beautiful boxes.
Hmm.
Like speaking of Umbrella, but a lot of the
Yes.
Arrow too, the gorgeous releases that look as great on your shelf as they do when you hit play on the player. And I think that's another vital thing in this day and age as well. Who do
Yeah,
you think's really owning that space right now? Would you say it's Arrow or
it for packaging wise, it's Umbrella hands down. Like
yeah.
they come out with the most gorgeous box sets ever, and they come out with box sets for the most random movies sometimes that I absolutely love. Like
Yeah.
there are a couple movies that I really enjoy. One of them is Time Crimes. The other one is Abre los Ojos, Open Your Eyes. And they had no right getting the collector's edition box sets that Umbrella housed them in. But I'm so happy personally.
Yeah.
It might only make like 500 of them, but at least like there is an option to have something great like that in the collection for a movie you love. It's awesome.
Yeah. Well, in that full moon box, it's a lot of movies that
Yes.
people might not really want,
That one
but
reminds me of the Arrow Video Enter the Video Store box
yeah.
that they did with like robot jocks and dolls like
Right.
that. I feel like there should be a release like that every year that kind of specializes in like a time past that
Yeah.
kind of like grabs a catalog, puts a great box set in. Because when that Arrow Video one released, like it was a huge deal. And I
Yeah.
feel like people are sleeping on this full moon one, and it's the exact same fucking thing. Like I don't understand.
Yeah, but with
It's
better
so good.
packaging. I mean, I love the box for it and the
Yeah,
horizontal, like everything about it's very, very
yeah.
outside and
Yeah,
it
and
looks
Umbrella, you have
stunning.
reversible artwork to change the artwork on the inside to
Right.
match the sleeve to go all horizontal.
Yeah.
They just have so much attention to detail, which I always love as a collector. Like I want my stuff to feel special on my shelf, and I've never had an Umbrella release that hasn't done that.
The one that really blew me away was when I worked on Tank Girl for them, which I've done
Yeah.
Tank Girl several times now for a couple
Mhm.
different companies, and that box art, that art
Beauty.
is
Hmm.
it's incredible. And
Yep.
I have a shelf where I put my newest releases forward facing in front of all the historical stuff. And that's going to stay there for a hell of a long time because it
Right.
just looks absolutely incredible. But to take that kind of time and love for a movie that doesn't get a lot of love,
Hmm.
frankly, I think that that's a real testament to what they're willing to do. And to the vinegar end, the sub label thing, it's like having like a craft mall where each little shop that you're visiting has a different specialty. And I think that's a pretty brilliant move on their part.
Yeah,
And
it's
some of
almost like
those
an
labels,
antique shop, like you said, like you hop from vendor to vendor. That's
yeah.
exactly what it is. Yeah, I love that.
Well, it's awesome because no matter what you're a fan of, there's someone specializing in it, and they're putting that kind of love that we're talking about pouring into these things mattering so much
Hmm.
into the most obscure things. I mean, you get really like into wave productions from Saturn's core and stuff that I never dreamt that I'd have access to, let alone in like a Blu-ray format or something like that. What's your experience been like with the world of vinegar?
I personally, I shat on Vinegar Syndrome for so long because I didn't understand why people wanted to have like constantly terrible movies in their collection. The thing that really got them on my side was their 10th anniversary sale. For 10 days, they gave you 10 movies, and each day those movies would cost $10.
Mm, yeah,
So for me, being the cheapskate that I am, like I try to. That's how I have a vast majority of my stuff is to get the best price I possibly can. So I'm
yeah,
like, hey, for $10, I can beef up. I think I bought like 50 or 60 titles that
sure.
10-day sale because I'm like, this is the cheapest it's ever going to be. That's how my brain works. I just got to go, go, go.
Yep.
And when I had that many releases come into me at once, I started to understand what people loved about Vinegar Syndrome. Just like nobody else is releasing this trash, but there's a charm to the trash as well. Like you gotta polish out these turds every now and again just to
Mhm.
pop them in and really enjoy the cheesiness that's on display because they're not really making a lot of movies like that these days.
Yeah, no kidding. No kidding.
But personally, I really like OCN a lot more than I do Vinegar Syndrome. That's the direct label that houses, I think, 15 to 20 different partner labels through
Right.
them.
Right.
I Umbrella is a partner label for them.
Hmm.
OCN I find very fascinating. Shutter was a partner label for them, and now Shutter is also going to be partnering with Arrow Video, which is absolute. Like I don't know how that double dip is going to work. I don't know if they've already are going to jump ship from Vinegar Syndrome to Arrow Video. Like I said, the Wild West, like things are just changing so rapidly. It's
Yeah.
kind of hard to keep up, but it's also fascinating to follow the news.
Yeah. Yeah. So you're in touch with all these other people that are in the collector realm with this.
Mhm.
What's what's the general word on the street around the media collectors that are out there? Because I can't go into forums because I can't, and it's just something that I'm really curious about though, because it's a hell of a lot of people who are so dialed in to everything here, and I'm curious what the conversations are like around the things that we're talking about.
I guess I have two different circles that I could talk about. One would be the fellow like content creators that are in the physical media realm
Mm-hmm.
who are trying to kind of they're trying to keep up, they're trying to find a niche with TikTok going away for 12 hours and then randomly coming back. It scared a lot of them to like jump to other platforms and start focusing in on that because you never know when that is just going to magically get pulled away like it did.
Right.
But then we also have just like the watchers of my content who are constantly complaining about price going up, which I totally understand. I'm
Sure.
complaining about it too. I try to wait until the best time until I see the best price and I pounce. There, some people are complaining about how I feel like everybody has their 2 cents on transfers. I give my 2 cents on transfers, and people are either okay with that or they just want to beat me up for my thoughts, my 2 cents on whatever I just said. Like
It's
it's
the internet.
sporadic. It's very sporadic. Yes, it's you never know what you're gonna get on that side of the fence. But I would say people just love movies, and you can definitely tell in my comments they are passionate about them still. So I'm hoping that that passion just continues to grow outside of the online bubble. And I really don't know if that's going to happen, especially if the next round of video game consoles is discless. Like that's my biggest fear because my first Blu-ray player was a PS3. My first
Oh,
4K player was an Xbox Series S.
okay.
Like if there's no good way to play this media or you don't have a player in your house period, because your average person isn't going to buy a 4K player now. They might find a Blu-ray or a DVD at Goodwill and like want to reminisce on times gone by. Like I've seen a lot of videos of people saying I don't want to pay X amount a month for streaming anymore. I'm just going to go to Goodwill, spend $40 and buy DVDs and a player there and just have a small little collection.
Hmm.
It's great for physical media, but it's also not helping new stuff thrive.
I
It,
hadn't thought about that video game angle with the
it's
devices.
scary. Like that's my biggest fear is that like I think there will continue to be discs until a new generation learns not to even pop a disc in. And then like
Yeah.
what do we do? Then
Yeah.
you're not going to grow. Then you are just stagnant.
Right, right. And well, then it begs the question what the next frontier for physical media will be, because people are always going to want to own this
Yeah.
stuff. We
Hmm.
have generations, we're generations deep now of people who have grown up understanding that they can have ownership of these things. And if they want to put their disc of Blood Beach in or whatever, they're going to do it, you know? And so I think that there will have to be another form, even if it's not a disc, there's going to have to be something out there. Have you heard anything in terms of what a next wave media frontier might be? Have you encountered any discussions or maybe even people sort of hypothesizing about what that might look like?
Just hypothesis. Like I don't think there's going to be another disc. I think 4K is top tier with what we get for discs. I've
Yeah.
heard people mention, I don't know why, like there isn't a player to put just a USB on something just so you can kind of plug it in. Because there have been talks of like a disc that's like a terabyte big, or that's never going to happen. I don't see that happening at all. I feel
Yeah.
like the disc era dies with 4K. I don't know where we go from there because I feel like it's going to be a hard pill to swallow for people to buy any type of USB to plug in to play something on a new player. Like players are going to be the hardest thing for this. I know TVs have USB ports in the back of them, so that would
Hmm.
be some type of way. There's got to be a new technology that arises in order for physical media to thrive like it once did. Like I really that's the hardest part. Like I'm trying to think of a future without a player. Like how can you pop something in to something that your TV has a port for in order to
Yeah.
play something? Like that's where my mind is going, but as a streaming kind of already does.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So
I'm not sure. I'm baffled, and that I'm also a pack rat. Like I want to make sure that I have the stuff. That's why I
Yeah.
have a vast collection behind me.
Yeah. Is there anything, what are your white whales at this point? I mean, you have an incredibly immense collection. What are your white whales?
Jesus, that's a question I need to think about a little bit longer. I have a lot of things that I would say the one that constantly gets brought up is there's this. I'm a steelbook collector, so there's a big beefy steelbook collector's box set of 7 that comes in like a replica box, and
Mm,
there's Blu-ray for Memento. Like my whales, my white whales are premium steel books that I would love to have, even if the format might be better elsewhere. Like there's a Kimchi DVD premium edition steelbook for Memento that has the image of like him holding up the Polaroid and it kind of like goes into itself.
mm,
You know what I'm talking about? It's
cool.
on a
Yeah.
lithograph, so you can kind of it just pops and just makes that imagery even that much more definitive. Like that's been one I've wanted to have forever, but it's going for like $400 or $500. So
Oh, yeah.
there's no way I'm ever gonna get it. But that's also one of the first like boutique realms that I dove into, was the premium steelbook realm. Before I even knew what an Arrow video was, I knew of the movies that I loved and I wanted to have the best edition of them possible.
Hmm.
Like I bought a whole bunch of like Pixar great premium steelbooks that have steelbooks that aren't released anywhere else besides these releases. And then on top of that, they have like outer casings, like boxes that you slip them into that have amazing artwork.
Yeah.
That's one thing that I love about physical media and steelbooks in particular, is that the artwork on them absolutely pops on that format. I'm
Yeah.
able to display them. Like I have magnets all over the basement. I have a strip of like Edgar Wright steelbooks. I have a steelbook wall that changes every couple of months. I just put up a bunch of Quentin Tarantino ones since I just got those in there.
That's so
I now have
cool.
20 that I can display over there. So
I love it.
to me, it's just displaying art and showcasing off the things that you love.
Yeah. Yeah. Are the people around you supportive of it?
Yeah, yeah, for the most part, thankfully. I mean, a lot of my friends know that I do it because I'm the only person that still has a player in their house. A lot of people got
Mm,
rid of them. A lot of people just stream. A few of my friends just pirate. Like they don't feel the need to own things.
yeah.
They're just like, I can just watch it and be fine.
Yeah.
And they don't care. Like what streaming drives me nuts about is I have decent internet, but there's still buffering issues.
Yeah.
Like it sucks. Like before I put my girls to bed tonight, I got home, they were watching Turning Red. I got dinner, ate, watched it with them, and there were like it just looked so pixelated at times. Like
Mm.
there would be like 10 seconds to where like they were in a big crowd and you had to squint because you couldn't see what was going on, and then it would focus in again. But it made me want to go downstairs and get my 4K. But the girl's like, no, no, we're in the middle of the movie. Don't do that, Dad.
It's
Like
like the modern pan and scan. Like, no, no, take it away.
it's terrible. Or like the old satellite days where a storm comes in
Oh,
and
yeah.
that's the
You're
worst. You lose
screwed.
connection. Yeah.
Yeah.
They'll never understand those days.
Yeah. Oh,
Mhm.
man. Well, it's really cool what you're doing. And I know everyone appreciates your efforts to promote this stuff and to keep this a positive discussion around it. It's this is not just owning things. It's
Mhm.
tapping into so much that's so personal with all of us. And I think that voices like yours are so vital, man. So thank you for all that you do.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And feelings mutual. You make great special features on stuff. Hush was one of my favorite physical media releases of last year, and
Thank you.
seeing that entire group of creative minds in the same room. I never listened to commentaries. I loved the video commentary. I thought there was just so much something there was something special about what you captured, and I'm happy that you brought that to the table.
Oh, that was all them. I mean, Mike sets the tone in the most wonderful, warm way.
Mhm.
He is incredible. I can't imagine anyone walking in the room and not feeling right at home
Sure.
immediately with him. So he
But
set the tone for that.
someone had to set up cameras and record it, and
That's
that was
true.
you. Like
That's true.
he might have that aura at all times, but now a bigger audience can see that aura, and I thank you for that.
Oh, absolutely, man. Well, this has been a treat, Jake. Thank you so much for coming on here to chat with me. We need to do it again soon, and I'm happy to join you anytime as well. It's always a pleasure.
Absolutely, man. It's been fun.
Mike, thank you for coming on to talk about this. I had to hit you up
Absolutely.
because you are in my world, the resident video game guru. You've seen a hell of a lot of transition in that realm. And I was
Yes.
in a conversation tonight, and it was brought to my attention in relation to physical media that there is a growing concern about how video game consoles are impacting this realm. So I'm going to
Mhm.
start by asking you in the years that you've been doing this, what kind of changes have you seen in the realm of physical gaming and consoles first of all?
I mean, there's been a huge change, and especially with the launch of the newer systems, the Xbox Series S, X, and the PlayStation 5. It's definitely more in the world of Microsoft than the competitors. We're just really leaning more towards digital.
Yeah.
One of the big moves that they've made um, with Microsoft is the Game Pass, which, putting it in our world of terms, that's basically Netflix for video games,
Okay.
where it's like a streaming service that you could just play infinite amount of games that you want for however long you want within your subscription time.
Okay.
So
So it eliminates the need. So at this point in 20, here we are, 2025, do people need to have discs for games anymore?
I feel, well, I mean, part of it's probably a personal opinion, but I feel like there should always be a venue for physical on many different levels. Um, once you eliminate it, okay, so I want to put it in these terms. If we're talking with my retail experience before it was Musicland, and Musicland, as far as like movies and CDs went for music, that crashed super hard for that company because they were not willing to embrace the newer technology. Music retail just tried to fight against it so hard back in the early 2000s. At
And when
least
you say
with
that, sorry to interrupt, but just to
that's fine.
clarify, what were they fighting against and what were they trying to hold on to?
Trying to hold on to physical media with
Oh, okay.
CDs with movies, DVDs, and Blu-rays, um, and with the whole downloading, illegal downloading, um, or by legal means, they were just ignoring the problem basically. And where I see in the video game industry, as far as video game retail goes, a much more aggressive means to try to stay relevant in that industry.
Hmm.
The real problem is uh, the music industry or the movie industry versus the video game industry. And I don't want to sound like I'm biting the hand that feeds me, but really feels like, and this is personal opinion, not fact, but it really feels like to me that the gaming industry themselves want to phase out physical media, where with music, it was reactionary to illegal downloading. With movies, you've got the streaming services kind of changing the game. I feel like it's the industry themselves with gaming that is really trying to force the hand on less physical media.
Well, it has to be cheaper. I mean, you think about the production side of things, that would save them a hell of a lot of money.
100% cheaper, and they can run the game however they want at that point. They can
Yeah.
charge whatever they want. They can make it available whenever they want. And that's the part that scares me when it comes to anything. I mean, we see it right now with movies. Again, going back to movies and streaming. I've seen I've seen things that I feel like are almost criminal with some of these streaming services and the treatment of some of the movies that they have on their streaming services. Edited versions of movies. Um, putting in like what drives me nuts, like Prime putting in dissolves for commercial breaks, even if you don't have commercials in it, they still have dissolves like you're watching
Oh
it
my
on television.
God, really?
Yeah, yeah. um bad audio mixes, bad, just so it's and that stuff can just disappear at any time.
Yeah.
Even if you
Right.
pay for it.
Yep.
With the whole streaming and digital world, we have way less ownership of any of that we've ever had before.
Right.
They could literally take it away at any time, and you see that all the time. In our world, again, let's take the Friday 13th game. And now, granted, that has a lot more to do with the lawsuits and everything, but that's a game where up until like the beginning of this year, you could play online. It's an online game. You could play with your friends, but now they've completely shut down the servers, and that game is now done. If you would have bought that game in December, in my opinion, you would have gotten ripped off
Yeah.
because you could not play it in January.
How do you think this change from consoles that have a disc player to just these non-disc things, how do you think that is or could impact the movie, like the physical media realm?
I feel like it's going to reach a point where it's I feel like it could reach a boiling point where the consumer has had enough. Take like where we live, for example, here in Iowa.
Hmm.
I mean, we live in areas that really, have good internet service or whatever, but we have a lot of communities around us that don't.
Sure.
And these, and video game companies or, you know, the movie industry or whatever are like basically you need to have good internet in order to now play video games. And that's even a lot of times with even physical anymore. They're really forcing that hand. And I'm sorry, some guy that lives out in the country is never going to get that.
Yeah.
So, so he has no relevance in the gaming world. He doesn't get to play games. So I don't know. And I also I also feel like with it as well, um, with the increase of digital, that's taking up more storage space on your systems. And the systems are not coming out with bigger and bigger drives. It's where you got to buy additional drives to increase your storage.
Oh, okay.
Where you still need that storage space when you're dealing with physical, but well, one, you own that copy physical. It's yours no matter what, and and it's not going to eat up as much as your storage with a physical copy as well.
Yeah.
Now they still, and I still don't see it for quite a long, long time where they're going to just completely say, "Boom, we're done with physical." Um, but they are putting out more and more consoles with digital only options now. Like PlayStation 5, right before the holidays, came out with the PlayStation 5 Pro, which is the newest version. It's got like the 4K ability, and um, what's a bummer is like there's just not a lot of games out there that can really run what the Pro can do yet. So
Mhm.
it hasn't been a big success. But with this system and other systems with PlayStation 5 that are digital, at least they still have the option where you can buy an external drive to attach to the system, which I think is a genius move. I think that is something, honestly, if they wanted to start going this route with digital, is something they should have came up with like 2 or 3 systems ago.
Mm.
Especially in the world of where when I see it, that's like one of the first things to go on somebody's system is like the disk drive,
Yeah.
or it just won't read disks anymore. So if you get a removable disk drive, just you buy a new one, your system's still good. So I think that's one of the smartest things that either of these companies have done, in the past 6 or 7 years is
Hmm.
creating that external drive. I feel like Microsoft is really, really pushing it more and more for the digital. And I would not be surprised with maybe in the next 10 to 15 years that Xbox won't make any systems anymore because you can now do Game Pass on your PC,
Yeah.
and I feel like it's just going to all go to that. For Microsoft, they have stakes in the PC world, obviously.
Yep.
So there's there's just going to reach a point where they don't feel that there's going to be a need for them to make a console anymore.
Where Sony owns Blu-ray. I mean, Blu-ray is
Hmm.
technology owned by Sony and by extension PlayStation. It makes sense
Yeah,
that that would remain relevant to their world.
yeah.
Do you see people coming in the store talking about or hear them talking about watching movies on their consoles?
Not so much anymore. No, not physically anyway.
Okay.
It'd be more about the streaming services more than anything else. It's never really been a huge conversation anyway,
Okay.
as far as movies are concerned. I know back in the earlier days of say like PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, that was a big selling point.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's not really much of a conversation anymore.
Okay. It's just interesting how these two realms are kind of running parallel in a lot of ways,
Hmm.
with film and physical and gaming and physical. And I think that it's a similar dedication to what they're getting to in the gaming crowd and in the film fan crowd. So that is another parallel there. The streams cross in that store between
Yeah.
these, these realms here. And so it's interesting that, and kind of comforting actually to hear that you don't think this is probably as big a deal.
Well, it's definitely bigger than it ever has been. Um, and definitely since COVID. I feel like COVID is also something that changed the world for all physical media
Yeah.
on a faster pace than the way it was going at the time.
Right.
But so yeah, it is bigger, and it is a bigger deal, but it's still not gone yet. Still not going anywhere yet. We're
Hmm.
just seeing less of it, and in the retail world, having to adapt to that. And uh, with that said, we rely a lot more on reservation on games because when we reserve a game, that our company can now say to the publishers, "Hey, we need X amount because we've already pre-sold these. We already pre-sold X amount of copies of this game."
Hmm.
And so they're guaranteed to at least make that many copies of that game. But you take like say a game, popular series, especially around our parts, Farming Simulator, which has always been a game that was never really mass produced, but Farming Simulator 2025, which came out this past year, I've had maybe like one or two copies since its release, and you just cannot get it in stock. And it's not exclusive to just my world. Walmart doesn't have it. Target doesn't have it. All the gaming retailers are having a harder time keeping these titles in stock because they are refusing to manufacture as many.
Hmm.
It's like a game. It's like a movie that they decide to dump on a streaming service versus putting in a theater.
Right.
It's still just mass produced. It's just in a streaming world as opposed to a physical world,
Got it.
which is
Interesting.
again where they're trying to take things. And I feel like it's never going to completely go away because we're still seeing DVDs being made. We still see Blu-rays being made, and then even when that stuff starts to trickle out, it's going to be like every other physical media industry. There's going to be a renaissance for nostalgia,
Hmm.
and it's already there. And I've been saying it with my own company for a while now, and I feel like one of the big things we need to combat with and still stay relevant in the video game world is carrying more retro stuff.
Yeah.
And we do, and it amazes me that I see the same customers that come in who have the PS5 that could probably download the exact same game straight to their drive on their PS5, but they'll come in, be like, "Oh man, you have this on PlayStation 2, this game I love so much. I need to have this copy, and I think I need to get a PlayStation 2 now to play it on."
No.
So I feel like it's the same thing with like boutique Blu-ray labels or
Sure.
vinyl nowadays with music.
Yeah, it's the
Uh,
dominant format. Who would have thought
yeah,
that, right?
I know. So dominant that freaking Walmart carries
Yeah.
LP. How insane is that?
Yeah. It's crazy. Well, man, I appreciate the insight. I just wanted to touch base and get your perspective because you're living this every day and seeing
Yeah.
people come in and out. Thank you for taking a few minutes here. I appreciate the insight.
Yeah, no problem.
So as you can hear, it's really up in the air as of now what the future of physical media looks like. Who knows what new frontiers we're going to be exploring in 2, 5, 10 years with this stuff. A reminder on the voicemail topic for the next episode tying into this is, what do you look for when you're buying a physical media release? What do you see happening in the market right now? What do you maybe forecast about what may be coming down the road? The number to call anytime is 951-357-6955, or you can email radiohourpod@gmail.com. You can follow me on social media. Just look for Justin Beahm or Justin Beahm Radio Hour. The website, justinbeahm.com. The Patreon, patreon.com/the Justin Beahm Radio Hour. And I really appreciate you tuning in today. Until the next time, please be good to yourself and to each other. Bye-bye.
You have been listening to the Justin Beam Radio Hour. The Radio Hour is a production of Reverend Entertainment, copyright 2024. All rights reserved.